So what does the patron provide? Protection from other patrons who might have poor wishes for the client, access to resources or information, how to do things, a group identity, and often your honor is determined by the size of your army, your patrons who work for you. Opportunities for political or social advancement. You see this in politics everywhere in the world. It's not just here, but I didn't, but if I were to work for, and it could be Hillary or Jeb, if those two are the two people who are put in nomination for the 2016 presidential election, if I were to work for either of them and quit my job here at Wheaton, work full-time for them, it normally is anticipated someone who puts in those type of hours will be offered some type of position in the government as a result of that. You become a patron. The political candidate becomes your patron and you are a client for that candidate. Now usually, national level, it's people who give major money gifts to the campaign, more so than people who work for the campaign, or people who work at very high levels of the campaign will be brought in for the cabinet or other things like this. And so the patron provide gifts and favors for the client. What does the client provide? Possibly labor. Again, you think political campaigns. They're out on the streets, they're calling up people, they're raising funds, they're working in an office, they're putting signs out, they're doing whatever it takes. The client might provide a certain level of income for the patron. If the client happens to be wealthy, they can provide this, but the patron has political power, so the patron provides protection for the wealthy client from other offices in government coming after the client for some reason. Public acclaim increases the patron's status, votes, other political allegiance, support against the patron's enemies. It's an interesting question to ask yourself, in what sense is the pastor a patron or a client? And in what sense is the congregation clients? It's anticipated that the clients will provide perhaps things like prayers for the pastor. You think of spiritual capital, whereas the patron, the pastor, might provide a certain level of status or prestige for the clients. Might provide, from the client's perspective, access to God that they otherwise would not have. And in cultures where the patron-client game is considered part and parcel of life, what does that mean then for us in terms of discipleship? You can see how if you walk into this situation and you try and establish small discipleship groups in the church, you might be taking clients away from the main pastor, who is the patron of the entire congregation. And so you have to watch things like that and be aware of those dynamics. But also, often, if you're serving in a cross-cultural situation and you are a person who is perceived to have political or other types of social power, patrons will want to attach themselves to you, unless you don't know how to play the game. Be careful, because for someone like me, I feel used in situations like that. But that's not what the client intends. So, a Korean group invited me to come and speak to them on contextualization, and I've mentioned this several times in the various videos. They brought me over, so they paid my way over. I anticipated they weren't going to pay me anything for that. The payment was coming over and having a free trip to Korea, being taken on tour around the country, being treated like a king, for a while, being given an opportunity to speak in various settings. And near the end, the translator, who became a very good friend, as much a friend as you can have in a cross-cultural setting in a couple of weeks, said, you just understand this in Korea. When you go to the airport and get ready to leave, I'm going to have an envelope that I will give to you. Just take it and just put it in your jacket and don't worry about it. But it will be payment for what you've done. He said, normally we pay people $300 for every speaking engagement that they do here. But I've told them, you're too humble for that. You really don't want that amount. So I said you would be willing to accept $200. I didn't even know they were going to pay me for it. So, but a part of me also said, well, no, I'd be happy to get $300 for it. But But since I wasn't expecting anything, $200 was wonderful as well, too. So the last day, we met at the airport, and he handed me this envelope, and I took it aside and just put it in my coat pocket. On one side, you can ask the question, who was patron and who was client here? In U.S. settings, I'm now seen by that organization as something of a patron of them. What do I provide for them? I provide protection against accusations. They're a very Korean group. They have been accused of being a cult, and so they've occasionally asked me to write letters on their behalf to leadership of organizations that might have accused them of that. And I've done that, and they've seen this accusation be rescinded. I'm not the only one who does this. They line up people that have helped them in the past do this. But I remember when I agreed to go over and teach, I started getting telephone calls from angry Americans who had once been part of the group and wanted to warn me about this group. And one of their comments, one of them says, you know they're just trying to use you. And understanding this patron-client game, I said to the person who was calling, and your point is? The reality is patrons and clients do use each other. And they provided for me an opportunity to understand elements of Korean culture better. To be used of the Lord to speak into their lives as well, too, in an area that's been a struggle for them. How to still be Korean but have a strong U.S. presence, because that's been a big challenge for them. So I was a patron to them while here, when I went over to Korea where the headquarters was, they became my patron and I was a client of them, and they provided me opportunity to speak to them in a way I never would have had before. The next time I was invited to Korea by a different group, they said they wanted me to fly business class, but they couldn't pay me. They would pay for the ticket. I looked up the tickets. Round-trip airfare was about $1,500. Round-trip business airfare, about $7,000. I thought, am I really worth $7,000 to go over there? No. Now, so I went over there and just on a regular economy fare. But again, they treated me like a king. I was on a penthouse hotel room. I've never been in a hotel room with a kitchen, a business office, a living room, a couple of different bedrooms, a washing machine room, and then it was on the 19th floor of a hotel, and it had a little grass patio on the outside. So it was very, very, very ritzy. And everywhere I went, this group treated me like I was a rock star. I had groups of Korean attendants who would cut through lines for me and made sure I didn't have to wait in line. It really was as weird as it sounds. But this group is a group you've never heard of before. Two Wings is the name of the group. It's a discipleship system. And in Korea, speaking at their conference was only 15,000 people, which gives you an idea how big it is and how widely distributed it is, representing about 30 or 40 countries, if I remember right at the time. Most of them in a framework. It's a type of equivalent of purpose-driven church, and Rick Warren here. It's in a type approach to what it means to be church, but from a very Korean vantage point. And it's a mega church pastor who started it, who has a series of books that have become very popular. So you can see how that's the equivalent sociologically to what Rick Warren has done, but it's not equivalent in terms of their doctrine, in terms of their understanding of discipleship, in terms of how they work. And I can say this, I was there for 5 days for the conference. I spoke for only 1 hour, but I went to every session, had a translator telling me what was going on and everything. I left the conference with about 5 books on Two Wings discipleship system, but I still don't understand it. It's just so indigenously Korean that I don't get it. And it feels strange to me, and it feels weird. But again, we're looking at patron-client in one sense. They wanted me to come on. In this case, they were the patrons, I was the client. But then I would provide loyalty, I would provide a voice, and they could say to people, look, we're bringing on these, and I was about the third person who had come who was an internationally known missiologist. So they have these well-respected people coming, and it's a vehicle for maintaining their own social status and helping them grow and develop. It's interesting to think through biblical examples then. Jesus meeting Zacchaeus, come down, I want to have dinner with you. Zacchaeus coming to faith and being willing to return money to those he has cheated, because he is now a client of Jesus. And let me ask this question for you to consider. What does it mean to be a client of Christ in a patron-client system? To bring him loyalty, to do work for him, as he provides protection for you, as he gives you opportunities to do things you would never do. You can see, if you think of discipleship in a patron-client format, but you think of Jesus as the ultimate patron rather than you as the patron, it can make a lot of sense socially, spiritually, psychologically. So again, just points for thought in terms of cross-cultural discipleship when we're thinking through this issue of patron.